Welcome everyone to another edition of the Travel Show with your host Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. I'm so darn excited because we are talking to Ted while he is away on one of his many trips. He's doing some show prep, which I'm excited to in a few weeks hear more about where he's off to. But Ted, thank you so much for calling in today. How have you been?
I've been doing well. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year as well. I can't believe we are in another year, and you thought this would be a perfect time to kick off and talk about some travel tips for 2025 or just travel in general.
I thought we could talk a little bit about some travel tips and just kind of what's new in travel and what are some of the trends that I'm seeing out there and kind of maybe get folks thinking about where they want to go in 2025 and give you some tips on maybe being a more efficient traveler.
Oh, do tell.
Well, I think, the first set of tips I always like to share revolve around flying. Airports are busier than they have ever been. And, I think a lot of us got used to things being kind of quiet during the COVID times. And you could show up at the airport and you could be from the curb to your gate in 15 minutes. And that's no longer the case. Airports are busy, planes are full, and people are traveling. And, the airlines advise you if you're flying domestically to get to the airport 2 hours before your flight. And if you're flying internationally, 3 hours before your flight. I would say that is excellent advice. But if you're traveling at a busy time, and sometimes it's hard to predict when those busy times are going to be, you might actually want to give yourself even a little bit of extra time.
Really?
This morning, I had a flight that left Minneapolis at 9 a.m., and I got to the airport just a little bit after 7 a.m. And, I pretty much have every type of priority access that's available, and it still took about 45 minutes for me to get through checking my luggage and getting through security. Planning ahead, making sure you have extra time, I think is really important. And one thing that happened that there's kind of no defense for is my bag got picked for a random bag check at the TSA counter, at the TSA checkpoint. So that took 20 minutes. And so you just have to have that extra time built into your schedule, because if that happens, there's nothing you're going to do to speed up that process. It's just going to be what it's going to be.
That is kind of annoying, isn't it? That your bag was picked. I mean, don't you have to go through a screening process anyway to get some sort of priority, like a pre-check or something? So why was your bag picked?
You do, but they do random screenings on people. They just pick every 27th bag and pull it aside and look through it in more depth. So that happens. But you did raise a couple of really good points, I think. And the first one is for people who travel, you don't have to be a frequent traveler, but if you travel a couple times a year, it's definitely worth looking into getting TSA PreCheck. And so TSA PreCheck is kind of meant to be that skip the line option at the airport security checkpoint. And it's something that you have to apply for. And as you mentioned, you have to go through a screening process to be eligible for that. But if you pass the screening process, I believe you have it for 5 years. And there's a fee associated with it. I think it's around $100. But 9 times out of 10, it will save quite a bit of time in security lines at airports here in the United States. And the other thing is you don't have to take off your shoes. You don't have to take off your belt. You don't have to take your laptops out of your bag. So it generally will save you quite a bit of time. And for people, I'd say if you even travel 2 or 3 times a year, or if you have a couple trips coming up, it's really worth looking into getting TSA PreCheck. It takes a couple months sometimes to get approved, so you can't just do it today and have it tomorrow. But I definitely recommend people take a look into that as a time saver at the airports here in the United States.
And then what's the difference between that and then is it clear and then there's the global
entry?
Yes.
So Clear is a private company, and they have an agreement with the TSA where they do a biometric scan of the retina of your eye. And when you go through the Clear line, you actually skip right to the very front of the security line. So if you have Clear and you have TSA PreCheck, you're going to save yourself basically that entire line, and you're going to hop right up to the front, go through PreCheck, and be done. You can still get Clear if you don't have TSA PreCheck, but then you just end up at the front of the regular security line. So there is a cost for Clear. It's a subscription service. Many credit cards that have any kind of travel perk, oftentimes they'll offer a discount on Clear membership or like a credit for Clear membership. But you can kind of stack them on top of each other. So you can go with TSA PreCheck and or Clear or stack them both together. Global Entry is a program that's actually administered by the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department, and it's designed to expedite clearance at international borders. So when you come back to the United States, whether you're driving or flying or taking a cruise, there will be another, again, it's a biometric line where they scan your eye. And if you're eligible for global entry, if you've completed the process, completed the application, you basically don't have to wait in line for customs and immigration here in the United States. And I would say, if you're coming back from a spring break trip to Mexico or a trip to Europe and you don't have TSA PreCheck, I would say it will probably take you at least an hour to get through the passport control line, and more if it's busy. If you have global entry, it'll probably take you 2 minutes. One of the great things about global entry is when you get it, you also automatically are eligible for TSA PreCheck. So it's probably the best overall value out there to get global entry. You do have to have a passport to apply for it, but when you do it, it's the same process. You apply, you go through an interview, they do a background check on you, and then boom, you're good to go. So it saves quite a bit of time for people who travel internationally.
And is that one of those that is only offered at the airport? Because I've known people that have driven up from Iowa to get global entry.
Yes, a global entry requires you to have a face-to-face interview with an immigration officer, and the easiest place to do that is at the airport. Minneapolis International Airport has appointments. There are also other places that do it, like they used to do it in Duluth, and they will oftentimes have like roving application programs where they'll say, okay, we're going to be in Rochester for a week and you can come here and you can do it. One of the other things you can do is if you do travel internationally quite a bit, you can have that interview actually when you get back to the United States at the customs line or at the passport control line when you return to the United States. So you can do that. These interviews can be tougher to get. Sometimes it's a 3 to 6 month wait to get that interview. So if you're thinking about, maybe a big international trip next year, I would start the process of applying for global entry now. The good news is the renewal of it is pretty easy, as long as you don't break any of the rules or do something wrong. Renewal is pretty easy, and most people who renew don't have to get an interview. You just pay the fee, and you're automatically renewed. So it's a great, great time saver. And, when you start to stack all these things together, and maybe you have enough status with a particular airline, or you qualify for one of their priority lines, or you're flying like in business class or first class, you can really save yourself quite a bit of time at the airport. But like I said, always be prepared for the unexpected, and maybe you just need to budget a little bit of extra time in there.
So do you think that the airports are busier because more people are flying, or are there fewer people working?
I think it's more people flying.
Okay.
I've not noticed too often that people seem short-staffed anymore. I think sometimes they just can't process the number of people given the space they have. And, in Minneapolis, in Terminal 1, they have new security checkpoints. They did a big expansion of them. Terminal 2, the old Humphrey Terminal that you and I would call the Humphrey Terminal, it's a little bit smaller, and so sometimes the lines there can be a little longer. But they do allow you to make an appointment to go through security. And if you go to the Minneapolis Airport website and you search for Humphrey Terminal or Terminal 2 security, you can actually make an appointment to go through security, and again, that can save you some time. And sometimes if it's bad weather and it takes you a little longer to get to the airport, having a little bit of extra time built into little bit of a buffer built in there can really save you from missing a flight.
How would you go about making that appointment?
It's a simple online appointment. I think you just pick a time, and then you have like a 5-minute window, and they have a separate line where you go through and you just show them your appointments and you go.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So airports are a place where there are a lot of, I hate to use the word hacks, but a lot of things that if you think about it and talk to your travel agent about these things, they can help you think through them and get set up with them so that you can save some time at the airport.
Well, and that helps with the hassle factor.
It does. And, vacations are supposed to be fun and relaxing. And so the faster you can get through all those airport formalities, I think, the better. Then you're ready to start your vacation.
Love it.
Well, one of the other things that's new, this isn't really a hack, but it's something that we're seeing a lot more related to cruising, and specifically to cruising, first of all, in the Caribbean, but it's also starting to spread to Alaska now. And that is that the cruise lines are building private ports of call. And so when I took my very first cruise, which I think was in 1986, the cruise line owned an island in the Bahamas, and the ship would anchor off the side of the island, and you would go ashore, and you basically had a beach party for the day. You had a beach, they had a restaurant on the island where they served food, and you could just enjoy kind of a nice, relaxing day on a beautiful beach in the Bahamas. And for a long time, the cruise lines maybe had a private island, but it wasn't such a big deal. And now in the last probably 5 years, the cruise lines are investing a huge amount of money in those islands and creating incredible experiences. Some of them have pools and even amusement parks,
Wow.
multiple restaurants, bars, lighthouses you can climb. I mean, it's really incredible. And so they're kind of all over the Caribbean. And it's pretty unusual to find a Caribbean cruise that doesn't include a private island. And what the cruise lines will tell you is that, and I think it's very much true, is that those private islands are the ports that have the highest guest satisfaction scores. And so folks really, really like them. And I can completely understand it. It is a nice way to discover the Caribbean, to enjoy the warmth and the water and the things you're going there for. But it's a very safe, contained area. And, you don't have to navigate shops and people selling taxis and things like that. It's all right there. And your food and your beverages are included on those islands as well. So it's part of the cruise experience. And folks are really starting to appreciate that more and more, I think. But now the cruise lines are actually investing in private ports elsewhere. And so in the last couple of years, there have been some new ports that have developed in Alaska that are essentially the same thing, where one of the cruise lines works with the Alaskan Native, the Eskimo folks up there, and they develop private ports of call in Alaska. And, of course, it's totally different, right? You're not going to go to Alaska to hop in the water and go swim with the whales. Mm-hmm. But they have interesting excursions, interesting activities, cultural amenities, and they're really a nice change maybe from some of the ports in Alaska, some of which are getting a little bit too congested. So they're kind of a way to relieve a little bit of the pressure on some of the ports. One of the cruise lines just announced a brand new one. Actually, I think two of them announced brand new ones now coming out. They'll probably open in 2026 and 2027. So that phenomenon, those private islands, are something that we're starting to see all over the world, really, and I expect it will continue to grow both in the Caribbean and elsewhere.
They're not going to run out of these islands? It seems crazy that you could just have a private island.
Well, it's interesting. One of the ones, and we did a show about this, I had a chance to cruise with a cruise line called MSC Cruises, and they really did something innovative. They took an island that had been used for undersea mining, and it was just a dump. I mean, literally, they had dumped rusty equipment and stuff there, and they completely cleaned it up. They're trying to restore the coral reefs. They've restored the vegetation and things like that, and the trees, and the birds are coming back. And so you can pretty much take anything and convert it into a private island. Now, that probably wasn't the cheapest way to do it. Maybe they could have found another island. But it is impressive, and it's neat to see that commitment to bringing something back to life that was essentially literally a dead junkyard.
No kidding. And it's a win-win, I would assume, for the area and for the cruise lines.
Yeah, and so the cruise lines, they employ a lot of folks in the construction of these islands, but also they have a lot of staff on the island. And sometimes, depending on where the islands are, they might live there for a period of time, or they might commute there in the morning from their homes on a nearby island. I talk a lot about cruises, and I think it's interesting how cruising is really, really on such an upward growth trajectory. And there are so many reasons for it, but I think those new private destinations, both in the Caribbean and Alaska, are just another thing that makes it a popular experience. We've had so many people at our agency this year who are like, we've never done a cruise before, and we kind of want to try it out. So we have a lot of first-time cruisers heading out to sea in the next couple of months, and it'll be really interesting to hear their feedback. And then the law of averages holds up. More than 90% of them will book another cruise within 5 years. And so I think that does speak to that experience and why it's becoming such a popular mode of travel.
Well, and it's an efficient way, isn't it, to really get a flavor for more than one place.
Right, and you don't have to unpack and pack.
Right.
You just get there, you unpack once, and, I'm looking forward to departing on a cruise tomorrow, and we'll get on board and unpack and then just enjoy. And, we can leave the stress on the dock with that empty suitcase back there that nobody will claim, and we'll just leave the stress on the dock and sail away and enjoy the trip.
Ted, tell us more about this trip that you're going on now. Just give us a little sneak peek, because I'm anxious when you get back to hear all about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk a little bit about it, but we've talked about world cruises before, and that's a cruise where the ship departs from a port and sails all the way around the world and comes back to the same port. Well, unfortunately, I can't take 3 months to do a world cruise right now, but I'm taking the first 2 weeks of a world cruise. So we'll be heading south from Miami through the Caribbean to the Amazon River and the Amazon Delta, and then continuing along the coast of Brazil before we finally get to Rio de Janeiro. I have something kind of fun planned when I get there. We're going to have a chance to go behind the scenes and see all the costumes and the samba dancing that they do for the Mardi Gras that's coming up in the carnival, they call it, but it's the Mardi Gras carnival in Rio that comes up in February. So exciting to see that. It's a beautiful place. I've never been to South America before, so new continent for me, and it should be a great experience.
So are you actually going to be on the Amazon River?
Yes, we sail up the Amazon. We dock in a city called Belém in Brazil, which is kind of like New Orleans. It's up the river, but in the Delta.
And yet you will be on the ocean, too.
Yeah, so kind of like New Orleans. The river flows in, but we leave the ocean and sail into the river.
So what kind of a ship is this?
So this is a ship called the Regent Seven Seas Mariner, and it's from a cruise line that we've talked about before called Regent Seven Seas. And it carries about 700 passengers. So it's a very small ship. It's an all-inclusive experience, so everything on board is included. And they also include a choice of shore excursions in each port. And I have to tell you, picking from all the choices they had was one of the most difficult things I've had to do recently, because there are so many good choices, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, well, I can only do this and I can't do this, and which one do I really want to do? So it will be a neat experience. We'll have some cultural immersion, a little bit of time to relax, see some historical sites, do a little shopping. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great way to spend part of the month of January. It's going to be a little warmer down there, I think, than it's going to be back home in Hastings.
I think you are right on that. But Ted, that doesn't mean that we can't still plan a vacation with you while you are gone, because you have such a great team.
That's correct. So my team, they're all in the office in January. They're leaving me behind in March, and they're all heading somewhere without me. But they'll all be in the office. So you're welcome to give us a call at 651-964-8245. Or just visit our website, tedblanktravel.com, and request an appointment. And one of my teammates, either Carla or Mitch or Shannon, will give you a call back and help you plan your next vacation.
So great to chat with you. Safe travels, and we will catch up with you next week. Ted Blank is the host of The Travel Show. Ted Blank, of course, is with Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure, and you are listening to KDWA